What if you discovered a secret so powerful it could make you invincible? A secret not hidden in a vault, but buried in plain sight, in the dusty pages of forgotten history? A secret that men have killed for and others have died trying to prove. This is not a superhero movie. This is the story of a man who thought he found that secret and the devastating, ironic, and frankly hilarious truth he uncovered. Welcome back to Tales of Wonder. If you enjoy stories that peel back the layers of ordinary lives to reveal the extraordinary chaos underneath, then you are in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell, because the truth is often stranger than fiction. Now let's begin today's story. Our story begins, as many tales of quiet desperation do, in a cubicle. Not a grand, oak-paneled office, but a beige fabric-walled cell in a sprawling insurance company, a place where dreams went to be processed, triplicate, and filed away forever. This was the kingdom of Leo Finch. Leo was a man whose life was defined by the gentle, soul-crushing hum of fluorescent lights and the soft, incessant click-clack of a keyboard that never seemed to type anything of consequence. He was 38 years old, and his most significant achievement of the last decade was perfecting a system to avoid small talk with Brenda from accounting at the coffee machine. Leo's world was one of managed risks and actuarial tables. It was safe, predictable, and utterly suffocating. His escape, his secret rebellion, was the world of the impossible. His small apartment was a temple to the esoteric, filled with books on lost civilizations, conspiracy theories about Atlantis, and his true passion, the legendary martial arts of old. While other men his age were following sports or learning golf, Leo was hunched over ancient, poorly translated manuscripts he bought online, studying diagrams of pressure points and energy channels. He wasn't interested in the flashy, high-kicking stuff you saw in tournaments. No, he was obsessed with the mythic, the ultimate techniques. And the crown jewel of his obsession was the Golden Bell Shield. The legends varied, but the core was always the same. The Golden Bell Shield was a Qigong and hard Qigong technique of such profound mastery that it could render the practitioner's body as hard as tempered steel, impervious to blades, bludgeons, and even, in some of the more enthusiastic tellings, bullets. It was said a true master could stand placidly in a storm of violence, a serene island in a chaotic sea, his body ringing with a resonant, golden chime as blows harmlessly bounced away. To Leo, it wasn't just a martial art. It was the ultimate form of insurance, a policy you carried in your very bones against the brutalities and unpredictability of life. His wife, Clara, a pragmatic and wonderfully grounded elementary school teacher, viewed this hobby with a mixture of affectionate amusement and mild concern. "Leo, honey," she'd say, finding him standing in their living room, eyes closed, holding a bizarre stance. "The most dangerous thing you're going to face today is that leftover lasagna that's been in the fridge a week too long. Maybe focus your energy on that." But Leo would just smile a secret, knowing smile. She didn't understand. She lived in the world of multiplication tables and playground politics. He was preparing for a world of hidden masters and ultimate truths. His office life was a study in contrast. He shared his floor with Darren, his polar opposite. Where Leo was quiet and contemplative, Darren was a vortex of boisterous, backslapping, alpha male energy. Darren was in sales. He drove a loud car, wore loud ties, and told loud stories about his weekend exploits, which usually involved some form of extreme activity, extreme kayaking, extreme fantasy football, extreme barbecuing. He was the kind of man who used the word synergy without a trace of irony and believed every problem could be solved with a firm handshake and a slightly too long period of direct eye contact. Darren's favorite pastime, second to talking about himself, was gently, persistently mocking Leo's hobbies. Finch, he'd boom, leaning over the cubicle wall, his cologne arriving a full 3 seconds before he did. "Still trying to become the Karate Kid? Gonna wax on, wax off your way out of that TPS report." Leo would just shrug, a silent, stoic mountain in the face of Darren's gale force personality. He saw Darren's mockery as the bleating of a sheep, unaware of the wolf, or in this case, the potential master of the Golden Bell Shield, living among them. In his mind, he was already superior. He possessed a secret knowledge. He just hadn't quite unlocked it yet. The status quo was a fragile, beige-colored peace. But peace, as Leo well knew from his history books, is always just the prelude to war. The catalyst for the escalation was a single, life-altering email. It was from a sender named J. Chun, with a subject line that made Leo's heart stop. The last true master of the Golden Bell Shield, seminars now forming. With trembling fingers, Leo opened it. The email was a masterpiece of persuasive, quasi-mystical marketing. It spoke of Master Jinlong, a man who had retreated from the modern world to preserve the pure, unadulterated form of the Golden Bell Shield, passed down through a single, unbroken lineage. It was filled with testimonials, grainy, poorly lit videos of a wiry, elderly man with a serene face and eyes that held the wisdom of the ages, allowing burly men to hit him in the stomach with baseball bats. The bat would make a distinct thwunk sound, and the man wouldn't even flinch. The text promised not just physical invulnerability, but mental fortitude, a shield against the stresses of modern life. It was everything Leo had ever dreamed of. There was, of course, a catch. The seminars were exclusive and expensive, prohibitively so. The initiation seminar alone cost the equivalent of 3 months of Leo's mortgage payments. That night, Leo presented the idea to Clara with the fervor of a televangelist. He showed her the videos, read her the testimonials, his eyes shining with a light she hadn't seen since he'd successfully assembled a particularly complicated IKEA bookshelf. Clara, God love her, tried to be supportive. She really did. Leo, this man, he looks like my grandmother's acupuncturist. And that video looks like it was filmed on a potato. Are you sure this is legitimate? That's just it, Clara, Leo exclaimed, pacing their living room. The real masters don't need high production values. They exist beyond all that. This is authentic. This is my chance to step out of this beige prison, and become something more. He gestured wildly, encompassing their entire safe, comfortable, lovingly built life. The word beige felt like an accusation. Clara's face fell, and Leo immediately felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly smothered by the intoxicating prospect of his destiny. The argument that followed was their first real one in years. It wasn't loud, but it was deep. It was about responsibility versus dreams, about reality versus fantasy. It ended with Clara going to bed early and Leo spending the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling, his resolve hardening. He had to do this. It was a calling. The next day, he did something completely out of character. He went to the bank and took out a personal loan, using their paid-off car as collateral. He transferred the money to an account in the Cayman Islands. The email's instructions were very specific about the method. He felt a thrill of transgression, the kind of risk he never took. He was no longer just Leo Finch, insurance analyst. He was Leo Finch, initiate of the Golden Bell Shield. When he told Clara what he had done, the silence in their kitchen was colder and heavier than any he had ever experienced. She didn't yell. She just looked at him, her eyes filled with a profound disappointment that was 1,000 times worse than anger. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Leo," she said softly and left the room. The first seminar was held in a rented community hall that usually hosted Zumba classes and AA meetings. The air still smelled faintly of sweat and regret. Master Jinlong was exactly as he appeared in the videos, ancient, serene, draped in simple, white silk robes. He spoke little, through a translator, a severe-looking woman who barked his gentle words as if they were military commands. The training was bizarre. It involved hours of standing in painful, stationary poses called Zhan Zhuang, or standing like a post. It involved visualizing a golden light coating their internal organs. It involved a series of strange, percussive breaths that made Leo lightheaded. And it involved being struck, gently at first, then with more force by the master himself. Leo would lie on the floor while Master Jinlong, his fingers like gnarled tree roots, would tap specific points on his body. Sometimes the taps were soft. Sometimes they felt like being hit with a live wire, sending jolts of pain through his system. This is to awaken the chi, the translator would explain, to forge the golden bell from the soft iron of your body. Leo embraced the pain. He saw it as a necessary purification. He'd come home bruised and exhausted, but radiant with a sense of purpose. Clara would wordlessly hand him an ice pack and a plate of food. Meanwhile, at work, the change in Leo was noticeable. He started carrying himself differently. His shoulders were back. He made eye contact. When Darren launched into his usual routine, Leo didn't just absorb it. One day, as Darren was holding forth on the killer instinct needed to close a deal, Leo looked him dead in the eye and said, in a calm, low voice, "The hardest steel is forged in the hottest fire, Darren. But the fire itself feels no pain." Darren was so stunned he actually stopped talking for a full 10 seconds. The escalation had begun. Leo was no longer the quiet target. He was becoming a provocateur. He started practicing his technique in the office. He'd stand by the photocopier, subtly holding a rooting stance, imagining roots growing from his feet into the building's foundation. He'd do his percussive breathing in the bathroom stall. He began to believe, truly believe, that he was developing the shield. He tested it in small ways. He'd deliberately bump his thigh against the corner of his desk. It hurt, but he told himself the pain was just an illusion, a test from his own mind. He'd let Clara playfully poke him in the stomach, and he'd tense his muscles, convinced he could feel a new, resilient hardness there. The final straw, the moment the conflict went from a slow simmer to a rolling boil, was the Office Olympics, the company's annual, cringe-inducing team-building event. It was a day of three-legged races and trust falls, a day Leo had always hated. But this year was different. This year, he had a secret weapon. During a game of Steal the Bacon, a chaotic scramble for a rubber chicken in the middle of the conference room, Darren, ever the competitor, decided to take Leo out of the running with a classic, full-body shoulder check. It was the kind of move you'd see in a hockey game. In the past, it would have sent Leo sprawling. But Leo, seeing the charge coming, planted his feet. He focused his mind. He visualized the Golden Bell shield, a shimmering, impervious aura around him. He felt the energy coursing through him. Darren slammed into him and bounced off. It wasn't a dramatic, cinematic bounce. It was more of a stumble, a loss of balance, as if he'd hit a surprisingly sturdy wall. Darren fell on his backside, a look of pure, unadulterated shock on his face. The entire room went silent. Leo didn't move. He stood there, a slight, serene smile on his face. Inside, he was screaming with triumph. It worked. By all the gods, it actually worked. The Golden Bell shield is real. The myth had become, in his mind, an undeniable reality. The escalation was complete. Leo Finch was invincible. And from that dizzying height, there was only one way to go. The triumph of the Office Olympics went to Leo's head like a strong wine. For a week, he walked through the office not with confidence, but with a palpable aura of smugness. He nodded sagely at Darren, who now pointedly avoided him. He practiced his stances with a new, unshakable conviction. He even tried to explain the principles of chi to Brenda from accounting, who just blinked and asked if it was like the gluten-free diet. Clara watched this transformation with growing dread. The man she loved was disappearing, replaced by a sanctimonious, self-proclaimed sage who spoke in fortune cookie proverbs and left pamphlets about internal alchemy on her pillow. Their conversations had dwindled to nothing. The couch had become his permanent bed. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Leo was in the living room, practicing his iron shirt conditioning by lightly tapping his chest and abdomen with a small, padded mallet he'd ordered online. Clara stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her patience finally exhausted. "Leo, we need to talk about this," she said, her voice tight. "We need to talk about the loan. We need to talk about us. This can't go on." Leo didn't stop his tapping. "Clara, you just don't understand the process. The refinement of the spirit requires the hardening of the vessel. I'm closer than ever. I can feel it." "Feel what, Leo? What exactly do you feel?" "Because from where I'm standing, I see a man who spent our savings to get beaten up by an old man in a community center and who now walks around the house hitting himself with a hammer. It's not a hammer, it's a chi activation tool, he retorted, his serenity cracking. And Master Jinlong isn't just an old man. He's a living treasure, something you would understand if you ever tried to see beyond your world of crayons and construction paper. The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he'd gone too far. The color drained from Clara's face. Her eyes, usually so warm and kind, went flat and cold. My world, she repeated slowly. My world of crayons. She took a step into the room. You want to know about my world, Leo? My world is trying to teach 30 children how to be decent human beings. My world is dealing with scraped knees and broken hearts and parents who don't care. My world is real. And you know what else is in my world? My grandfather. Leo blinked, thrown by the non sequitur. Your grandfather? What does he have to do with anything? Everything, Clara said, a bitter smile touching her lips. You see, my grandfather, he wasn't an insurance analyst from Ohio. He was a martial artist, a real one. He grew up in a small village in Guangdong. He didn't have time for mythical techniques and golden shields. He learned how to fight, for real, to survive. Leo lowered the mallet, a cold not forming in his stomach. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that when I was a little girl, my grandfather lived with us for a summer, Clara continued, her voice dangerously calm. He tried to teach me a few things. Self-defense, how to fall, how to hit. He was a sweet, gentle man, but his hands are like stone. He told me stories, not fairy tales about being invincible, but hard, practical lessons. And one thing he told me, over and over, was to beware of any so-called master who promised invulnerability. The body is flesh and blood. Xiao Bao Bei, he'd say. Flesh and blood. The goal is not to become a wall. The goal is to not be where the punch lands. Leo stared at her, his mind reeling. All this time, she had a direct connection to the very world he idolized, and she'd never said a word. But the videos, he stammered. Master Jinlong. The baseball bat. Clara let out a short, harsh laugh. Oh, Leo. The baseball bat? It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. It's not about having an unbreakable body. It's about physics and pain tolerance. The master controls the angle. He has the attacker hit him with the sweet spot of the bat, which transfers very little force. The bat makes a loud noise. It looks devastating, but it's like being tapped with a rolled-up newspaper. It's a carnival trick. My grandfather showed me how to do it when I was 12. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Leo's golden bell shield, his invincibility, his entire identity for the past year, crumbled into dust in an instant. It was a lie. A carefully constructed, financially ruinous, marriage-destroying lie. And your master Jinlong, Clara went on, mercilessly driving the point home. I did some digging. His real name is Jerry Chun. He's not from some mystical mountain temple. He's from Fresno. He was a failed actor who found a much more lucrative career selling ancient wisdom to people like you. Leo sank onto the couch, the padded mallet falling from his limp fingers. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the window. The twist was not a hidden identity of a hero, but the hidden, mundane, and devastating truth behind a myth. The master was a fraud. The technique was a parlor trick. And the only person who had known the truth all along was the wife he had dismissed as unenlightened. The fallout was slow, humiliating, and thorough. Leo was a balloon that had been popped, and all that was left was the shriveled, rubbery reality. He couldn't bring himself to go back to the seminars. He sent a furious, rambling email to J. Chun, demanding a refund, threatening to go to the authorities. He received a single-line reply. All donations are non-refundable. The path to enlightenment is paved with surrendered attachments. It was the most expensive fortune cookie he'd ever received. The personal loan hung over him and Clara like a shroud. They had to remortgage the house to pay off the debt. The carefree financial security they had worked a decade to build was gone, sacrificed at the altar of Leo's vanity. At work, The story of his invincibility had, of course, spread. But now, it was followed by the inevitable whispered punchline. Darren, having recovered his bravado, was the ringleader of the mockery. He didn't even have to say anything. He just walked past Leo's cubicle and make a soft, thwunk sound with his mouth, sending his sales bro friends into fits of silent laughter. Leo was a bigger laughingstock than ever before, but now the joke was layered with a pathetic, financial stupidity that made it infinitely worse. The true resolution, however, happened at home, in the quiet spaces between them. There are no dramatic reconciliations, no passionate make-up scenes. The trust that had been broken was not something that could be repaired with a grand gesture. It would require 1,000 small ones. Leo had to surrender, not in the spiritual sense, but in the real, human sense. He had to surrender his pride, his fantasy, his entire constructed identity. He had to look at Clara and say the 3 hardest words he'd ever spoken. You were right. He started therapy. He acknowledged his midlife crisis for what it was. Not a spiritual awakening, but a desperate, flailing attempt to find significance in a life he found meaningless. He began to understand that the beige prison of his life was one he had built himself, not with walls of cubicle fabric, but with walls of fear and disengagement. Slowly and painfully, he began to rebuild. He didn't try to become a master of anything. He started small. He learned how to fix a leaky faucet. He started actually listening to Clara talk about her day, about her students, and he found, to his surprise, that her world of crayons and construction paper was far more complex, challenging, and heroic than any fantasy he'd ever indulged in. He began to cook dinner. He was clumsy at first, burning pans and over-seasoning pasta, but he persevered. It was a Tuesday evening, almost a year after the twist, that the final piece of the resolution fell into place. He was in the kitchen, carefully following a recipe for chicken piccata when Clara came home. She looked tired, but she smiled when she smelled the food. "Smells good," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "We'll see," Leo said, his focus on the pan. "It's a risky maneuver. A lot of lemon juice. High stakes." Clara leaned against the doorframe, watching him. "You know," she said softly, "my grandfather had another saying. He said the strongest shield isn't made of gold or iron. It's made of the people you love, the home you build, and the humility to know you can always break." Leo stopped stirring and looked at her. For the first time in a long time, he didn't see a pragmatic schoolteacher or an obstacle to his enlightenment. He saw the strongest, most resilient person he had ever known. The person who had, in fact, been his golden bell shield all along, protecting their marriage from the worst of his folly, even when he was too blind to see it. He didn't have a grand speech. He just nodded, his eyes slightly damp. He was a very wise man. He was, Clara agreed. "Now, are you going to let that chicken burn? Or are you going to prove your mastery in the kitchen?" Leo smiled, a real, unforced smile, and turned back to the stove. The shield was gone, but for the first time, he felt truly, authentically safe. He never told her, but a month later, out of morbid curiosity, he tried to replicate the baseball bat trick in the garage, using a broom handle and a hanging sack of potting soil. He misjudged the angle, swung too hard, and gave himself a bruise on his stomach that lasted for 3 weeks. The Golden Bell Shield was, indeed, a myth, but the profound, throbbing, and deeply ironic proof of his own profound gullibility, that was, and always would be, painfully, hilariously real. So, what is the one Golden Bell Shield in your own life? That one thing you once believed would make you invulnerable, and what painful or perhaps funny lesson did it ultimately teach you about real strength? If this story resonated with you, if it made you chuckle or wince in recognition, then do us a favor and give it a like. Share your own stories of misplaced faith and hard-won humility in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Tales of Wonder and hit that bell icon. We've got so many more stories about the messy, beautiful, and endlessly surprising human condition to share with you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. See you in the next video.